So, as you know, last night we had a 13-year-old that was a victim of a shooting on the west side of the city. I'm going to make some remarks about that. Please remember, a lot of the people involved in this incident are juveniles, which restricts a lot of information that I am allowed to give. Also, please remember it's an active investigation, so I'm not going to give information that could hinder the success of the investigation. That being said, I'll go over what I have, and the mayor is going to say a few words, and then we'll do a few questions. So, as many of you know, at 6:53 p.m. last night, officers were flagged down in the area of Epworth Street and Frost Avenue on the west side, reporting that someone was shot. Officers then located a 13-year-old female there, suffering from at least one non-life-threatening gunshot wound to the upper body. I'm happy to say this was just a very slight graze wound, although it does not downplay the seriousness, the potential that this incident had. While investigating this, officers learned of two additional shooting victims, aged 14 and 18, had been dropped off at Strong Hospital by a stolen red Hyundai. Upon interviewing the victims and potential witnesses, officers were able to ascertain that the shooting occurred in the 500 block of Frost Avenue. The victims were in a gray vehicle that struck a van on Frost Avenue. There was an argument at the crash site, and at some point shots were fired. The three teens that were associated with the gray vehicle were struck by the gunfire. The 14 and 17-year-old males got into the stolen red Hyundai and were taken in that vehicle to Strong Hospital. Their injuries have been determined to be non-life-threatening at this point. The 13-year-old female and a witness ran from the scene on foot and later flagged down officers. Officers and investigators have recovered evidence of shots fired on Frost Avenue, and we've also recovered the stolen red Hyundai. The gray vehicle involved, operated by some of the victims, which we suspect was stolen, is still outstanding at this time. We encourage anyone with information about the incident to call 911, Crime Stoppers, 311, or utilize the new Report It app that the mayor and I talked about the other day. And I'll hand it over to Mayor Evans.
I'll be brief because this is an ongoing investigation, obviously. But I want to put this in what I call the larger context. I regularly talk about the larger context. We have a severe problem with our young people that are being failed by systems. And what does that look like? And what you see today, and what we're talking about today, is just the tip of the iceberg, but there's a lot of things under the iceberg. Too many of our young people are being touched by the system. They're then going into family court and then not getting the support or direction that they need, and then coming back out and then either becoming victims or perpetrators of violence. What do I mean by that? Because I don't do anything, I don't say anything without data and evidence. What do I mean by that? There's someone now who had a contact with the Rochester Police Department that was just arrested for a triple murder in Pennsylvania. The Rochester Police Department picked him up for a criminal possession of a weapon. What happened with that adjudication? I now have on my desk at City Hall a bill for $1 million related to the Otis Street fire, in which 3 children were involved in that were 15, 14, and 8. The question has to be, what are we doing? When our young people are being caught up in the system, what are we doing, number one, to make sure that when they are released, that they are being released to something, that you must go to school every day, that you will wear a monitor and someone will come in and check on you every day. We are seeing what I call repeat customers doing the same things over and over again, and they are young people that are doing it. So it's a different stage. It's not like it's a 21-year-old or 31-year-old that we can deal with. These are children that are doing this over and over again. But the other piece of this is that how can we expect our young people to behave differently when they know that there are no consequences for some of the actions that we are seeing. So on my way over here, I pulled up 21 individuals that were arrested for criminal possession of a weapon. Criminal possession of a weapon means that you have a gun that's illegal that you should not possess. All these individuals were arrested. I looked at a 2-week time frame. They were arrested, 21 people. Many have been accused at shooting at things. One person had beat up his girlfriend and pulled out a weapon. All these individuals, except for one, were released without anything. We have to go back to the system where we provide support and help and consequences for if you don't do what you need to do. We had gun court. If you look at the cases in gun court, they are completely almost dried up to nothing. If we are going to release people, if we are going to release juveniles, we have to mandate that they go to school, that they go to a job, that they do community service, that they do certain things to allow them to stay out of trouble. So that's an issue. And I want to thank the community, because the community already, we released this reported app 2 days ago. Already we're getting tons of tips, and that's without lots of advertising. So I want to encourage the community to continue to submit tips. 63975, you can type report it, you can type Rochester, and you can submit those tips. That is absolutely critical for us to continue to engage and solve some of these challenges that we are seeing. But I am afraid that if the juvenile justice system, and in particularly family court, and I'm not one to tell another branch of government what to do, because as the mayor, I don't want people telling me what to do. But too many of these young people are being affected, entering the system, and nothing is being done to work to transform their lives. And as a result, you're seeing them get shot, killed, maimed, or being either the victims or perpetrators of violence because nothing's being done to create a program for them to keep them out of that life. That has to change, and it needs to change today. And People's Exhibit A is what you saw yesterday in the area on the west side of the city where you had individuals in stolen cars who 3 individuals ended up getting shot, and all under the age of 18. So this is not just pie-in-the-sky conversations that we're having here. This is hard data and things that we are seeing. We need to look very deeply at how we are engaging with our young people, because the Rochester Police Department or the city of Rochester cannot deal with juveniles who are then going into a system that I don't control. They must go into programs. They must go into intensive therapy to make sure that they are on the straight and narrow, and when they are not, there needs to be consequences. And their parents must play a role in that if we are to transform this problem. But for the grace of God, that we are standing here today with non-life-threatening injuries. They could be, but they are life-threatening injuries, life-altering injuries, but non-life-threatening injuries. But for the grace of God, we could have 3 people under the age of 18 in body bags if the bullets traveled at a different trajectory or hit them somewhere else. But for the grace of God, that did not happen. So it is my hope that we will continue to engage with our systems to make sure that young people that are getting caught up in these situations are put into a positive track. The vast majority of our young people are doing the right thing. I was just at the Black Scholar event on Monday. Hundreds of scholars being honored for doing the right thing. But we have way too many that are not doing the right thing, and it's having an effect on our neighborhoods. And it is not an indication of these individuals not being picked up. They're being picked up. I have the list. I know the names. So he can't say that they're not being pulled off the streets. But I don't run a social service agency. We need to get young people involved and their families involved to make sure that we stop this cycle. Otherwise, we're doing a disservice to the broader community, but more importantly, we're doing a disservice to these juveniles whose lives could be turned around, but instead are being cut short because they will end up either in jail or in a body bag, and that has to change. So again, I want to ask anyone that has any information to call 911 to call the mayor's office or use our new app, which is already getting lots of traction. 63975, report it. You can download it, and if you don't want the app on your phone, you can go to the website and put in that tip anonymously, and my office will then forward those tips to the police department if you want to do it anonymously. I will tell you, I am so happy to live in Rochester in our community because they've had enough, and they want to see a change. But in order for that to change, we have to have all of our systems working together. And it starts with engaging these young people in a meaningful way, not just arresting them and then saying, all right, here's you're out. Go fend for yourself. We'll see you in a couple of months. That's got to change. And that starts in family court, period. Thank you.
Questions?
I have one for Mayor. So, Mayor, you just said it. They have to go home with something, but they have to go home to something. At what point do we say, hey, mom, hey, dad, hey, mom and dad, and hold them accountable? I mean, 22 teens shot this year, 3 of them fatally, dozens and dozens of kids stealing Hyundais and Kias. When do we hold the parents accountable?
I think that you have to do what you can within the context of the law. I'm not a lawyer or an expert, but I do think that failure to supervise or endangering the welfare of a child is extremely important and should be considered. Also, I will say that many parents have called for help. There are parents that have called the mayor's office. I had a grandmother call the mayor's office and said, I am worried about what my child is doing. So we were able to intervene and get them involved. But if the court system, particularly family court, does not work to create a specific program to help that family and that child, then it's all for naught. And right now, that's what's happening. That it's becoming a revolving door, and you get a child that's picked up on criminal possession of a weapon or a stolen car, and they are leaving with no program. Nothing. Nothing. And this is not something that's just made up. This is data. This is data that I know. And how do I know this data? Because I just was in a meeting on Monday with every single level of law enforcement, from federal to local. And I was given that information from experts that are telling me that this is what is happening. It has to change. It has to change. We have to use the court system as a tool to either rehabilitate or hold people accountable to create programs to make sure that they're doing what they need to do when they get into these systems. Because we're not told what happens once they go into family court, for example. It goes into the ether. You can ask any elected official. And all we want to see is some type of productive step to make sure that it does not become a repeat course over and over again. And if a parent reaches out and says we want this help, then we need to be able to deal with them. And it just can't be this revolving door and we get to it when we can. See, because I have to deal in the real world as mayor. I hear about this. I see this stuff every day. That has to change. And it's something that we're going to continue to push for.
Mayor Evans or Chief Smith, it took an innocent man to get shot and killed. I'm talking about Richard Shasha, and I know it happened in another jurisdiction, but it eventually put an end to armed carjacking. Does the same thing need to happen to put an end to car thefts?
No, it should not. It shouldn't take an innocent person getting killed because we can't normalize these things. You know, I often talk to people and they say, and I'll say, I can't believe there's another shooting. The chief gets a call, I get a call whenever there's a shooting, whether it's at 4 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And someone once said to me, they said, why are you surprised? The problem is that for many people, they have become numb to this because they see this as just normal urban warfare. And it should not be. A grandmother should not have to worry about her car being stolen out of her driveway, or a mother should not be calling me to say, I need to be able to get my kid's uniform because my car was stolen outside of these have real life consequences for individuals. But when people don't see the consequences of their act, they continue to do whatever it is they want to do. And that's what's happening here. And I'm not saying that you lock everyone up and you throw away the key. What I'm saying is that if you take a car and then you go into family court, that there is a program that you are mandated to go to, period. That if you miss school, there's a sanction for that. That if you miss an appointment with a mental health provider, that there is a consequence for that you're engaging with the family. And these are things that go beyond city government. They go to our legal system. And they need to do that, or we're going to see more of these young people being involved in these type of violent acts. And we, as you have noted, many of them have resulted in death.
I have a question for Chief Smith, if I could. You know, summer break is upon us. You just heard the stats. You know the stats. What is RPD doing to gear up for these teens involved in violent crimes or stealing, thefts? What's RPD going to do?
Well, we're going to continue doing what we've been doing. We've taken over 325 guns off the street so far year to date. We have our anti-violence detail, our proactive detail up and running. That's the one that started in October and was very successful. Targeting known violent gun offenders, catching them with guns, and then sending them where applicable to federal prosecution. So we're going to keep doing exactly what we've been doing. But again, the issue is, like the mayor talks about, prevention, the three-pronged approach. So I don't have school resource officers. I don't have resources in the schools. I have no way to do outreach to these youth and say, hey, there's consequences to this. This isn't cool. This isn't Grand Theft Auto. You're not just out having fun in a car, not affected. This is real world. So I don't have the resources to do that. That's the component that right now we seem to be missing, because they shouldn't be taking these cars in the first place, let alone after we catch them and then it's adjudicated. We shouldn't be at this point altogether. So again, everyone talks about, well, we don't want the police doing this, that's fine. But where's the part that's supposed to come before us? Again, it seems like the cart was put before the horse on some of these reforms, and now you have a void, and now you're seeing the results of that void, because there is no one, it seems, that is getting through to these youth and telling them this is not a video game.
This will be at one very, very, very important point to your question, and your question, which I think is important. But a very important part to your question that has to be answered is that some of this does not fall upon the police. So what are we doing? Spending millions of dollars on recreation options for kids. What are we doing? Having rec centers stay open extra hours. I think you were at the conference where we kicked off our summer enrichment program. So how can we steer young people to those types of programs to be able to do that, while at the same time also doing the things that the chief has mentioned? Remember, over how many guns off the street?
325.
325 guns off the street. Just in 3 weeks, I told you all the people arrested for CPW.
209.
209. That part is being done. So the other part of your question should be, what's happening to the individuals that are being repeat and going through the revolving door of them not getting any services after they go to court, other than saying, we'll see you when you come back. And then they're doing it again. And the same thing's happening with young people. That is the piece that needs to be answered. Because you're not going to arrest your way out of this problem. I think we got time for one more question. The chief's got to go to a very important thing. So last question, and we got to go. Yes.
Your state of emergency on the government. Are you going to extend it again? And
Oh,
how many times have you extended it since?
I've extended it since June, and it's going to continue to be extended. And if it was not for that state of emergency, we would have even more mayhem than we see sometimes. Because with that, we don't make a splash when we do a lot of things, but we are able to shut down problem properties. And you will see us expanding that in other ways, which we'll be talking about in the coming days, particularly as it relates to shutting down streets that have persistent shot spotter gunfire, in which you have individuals that think that they can take over streets. And many of these folks are babies, they're kids, but they think that they're in charge of the street. Don't pay taxes, don't live there, and then putting their grandmothers, their parents and grandparents in danger. So we will absolutely continue to extend the gun violence emergency and use any tools that we have not used yet to continue to try to implement the changes that we need to see. But that has been very effective for us in terms of making sure that we are able to close down areas that need to be closed down.
So it's been going on for 1 year now?
Almost, not yet. Not yet. You got a couple of weeks before you hit the 1 year anniversary. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.